Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast. My name is Philip Ideson, a 20-year procurement practitioner, former head of procurement and advisor to procurement leaders around the world. I started Art of Procurement to help leaders and their teams access the resources they need to increase their impact through insight-driven procurement. You are listening to our flagship podcast where we pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics and tools that leading procurement teams are using to align their impact with the needs of their business. Today on the show, I welcome Tony Harris, Global Vice President, Business Network Solutions at SAP Ariba. In today's conversation, Tony and I discuss what today's integrated business network actually is, and we discuss examples of different use cases for an integrated business network. We chat about data models, spot buying, and many other facets of business networks, while Tony shares some tips on how procurement leaders could start on their business network design and implementation journey. So I start by asking Tony if he found procurement or if procurement found him.
Procurement found me, and I'm really glad it did because I've been passionate about it for the last 17 years. I started life as an accountant, but quickly moved into the software industry, initially ERP and then CRM. And then after several years in the CRM space, I was actually approached by a startup company called Frictionless Commerce back in 2003, who were a best of breed sourcing and contract management solution provider at the time. And, I didn't even realize that type of software even existed then, having spent years working in sales and pre-sales roles for these software companies, seeing a software solution that largely automated the RFP process, and then seeing this kind of reverse auction capability, and I was like, wow, this stuff is amazing, it's revolutionary. So I was sold, and I joined Frictionless as their first non-US employee. They were a Boston-based company, and subsequently went on to run the European operation at Frictionless until that company was acquired by SAP in 2006.
And you experienced the pain points being on the sales side of running through the RFP process and responding to the RFP process without technology, I imagine.
Exactly that, which is why when I stumbled across this software, I just couldn't believe, as I say, that this kind of stuff existed. Having spent many years doing the traditional approach of responding to RFPs via Microsoft Word and Excel spreadsheets, to see that there was this software that created a structured RFP response that could be auto-scored, and there was a structured way of provided pricing. I was honestly blown away. And, ironically, just before stumbling across this in my CRM role, I had actually, if you will, sold SRM, sold our CRM solution as an SRM solution to a large manufacturing company that actually wanted something to help manage their strategic suppliers. And unbeknownst to me, just about 7 months later, I'd actually be working in the SRM space, as we used to refer to it then.
Yeah, it's funny, back in those times, I was just starting in the procurement profession, around 2000 in manufacturing as well. And, we were relying on faxes at that point to communicate with our suppliers, and sending inventory and requirements and things. I was being the bottom on the totem pole, I guess, for a GM in a GM factory, sending faxes for inventory requirements to folks. And, that wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things.
And no, you're right. It wasn't that long ago. And I think there's probably many a company out there that only probably packs away their fax machine just a few years ago. And who knows, there's maybe some still using them.
No, I want to really focus the conversation today on business networks. And business networks is something in procurement we hear, and perhaps we hear it from different contexts. And so I just wondered, from a terminology perspective, if you could just share from your perspective, when we talk about business networks, what are we really talking about?
Yeah, in short, I'd say a business network is a single platform where you can connect to all your trading partners through a single directory that enables effective collaboration via a common data model, a defined set of services, and where intelligence is really built in as standard. It's a collaboration platform where you onboard once and then you can connect to many in support of a range of different business processes.
Yeah.
Maybe easier described if I give you an example. So on the business network, we have an SAP. I can discover a new supplier of some industrial equipment, but then I can connect with that supplier and order the equipment. I could find
Mhm.
my own logistics provider on the network and connect them to that supplier to go collect the equipment and ship it to my production facility. I could discover an engineering company on the network and send them a service order to go ahead and install that equipment that I just had delivered. And then I could have the OEM manufacturer of that equipment publish the technical details of the equipment, especially if it's like some kind of custom, production
Mhm.
facility that's been built. They can post that to the network together with supporting documentation and pass lists. I can have IoT, Internet of Things sensor data shared with the engineering company to monitor the health of the equipment, and they can schedule preventative maintenance, finding the right resources via the network to perform the work. And then, the engineering company can even access the OEM manufacturer details on servicing the equipment via the network. So, it's far broader than the more traditional procurement network where we just send in purchase orders and invoices.
Right. Yeah, and to be honest, I think that's where a lot of, when you think about business networks from a procurement perspective, that's maybe where you start, because that's what, we've kind of been used to talking about, I guess, for a long time, and perhaps through through the silo of procurement,
Right.
rather than taking a bigger picture perspective. Um, is this, I think that, you talked about what you were able to do through SAP. A lot of folks in procurement will think about the Ariba supplier network. Is this different than the Ariba supplier network? Is the Ariba supplier network a part of this, or is it an evolution from there? Again, I'm just kind of trying to level set for folks who have heard some of the technology and terminology, I'm sorry, and trying to connect the dots.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, we tend to use the word or term now trading partner rather than supplier because as our
Hmm.
business network has evolved from the Ariba network, we're now connecting different types of organizations in the supply chain. It's no longer just about connecting a buyer with a supplier.
Yeah.
We now support business processes and collaboration scenarios, as I say, where we connect buyers and suppliers with logistics operators and OEM manufacturers with asset operators, etc. Uh, so yes, the business network was formed from the consolidation of our Ariba network initially, but then
Hmm.
also our logistics business network and our asset intelligence network. And it will continue to expand in support of more and more processes in the future as well.
Now, do you see that these integrated business networks are becoming increasingly important? That organizations are looking at this as a way to solve perhaps some pressing challenges where they didn't have solutions for it in the past, or there's just kind of more interest in looking at these networks holistically.
Yeah, absolutely. We live in an age where change is the only constant, right?
Hmm.
And whether that's changing demands due to consumer preference or whether it's changing business or political climates, the environment, of course, and our impacts on it and what we need to do to become more sustainable. And then, of course, there's this small thing called a global pandemic.
Yeah.
Um, the companies that are able to react best to these changes have digitized their business. They're running their business on intelligent cloud solutions. But business, or rather doing business, extends beyond the four walls of your own organization. You also need your trading partners to be connected digitally in order to achieve the best outcomes. And when you
Hmm.
achieve that, you're able to ensure that your supply chain can react to change far more quickly. In effect, you've got a far more resilient supply chain.
And did you see that, like examples of that, as people are reacting and responding to the pandemic?
Oh
Because
yeah,
I'm sure that's kind of the ultimate stress test, isn't it?
absolutely. I mean, let me give you a couple of examples. So one of our customers were responsible for constructing a temporary hospital just outside of New York in response to the overwhelming number of people
Hmm.
getting infected with COVID-19. And they built the hospital, and of course, as part of the fit outs, they needed hospital beds. Obviously, very specialist type of products.
Yeah.
However, the supplier they always bought their hospital beds from didn't have any stock and couldn't get any, and that's a real life problem, right? It's a life
Yeah.
threatening
Yeah.
problem. given the scenario. So thanks to our business network, they were actually able to find and, more importantly, transact with a new supplier of these beds within 30 minutes. It's a trading partner that was on the business network that had stock, was ready and enabled to transact. And then another, again, real world example, we had an agribusiness customer of ours based in the Middle East, and they needed storage facilities for an excess of grain products that they'd produced.
Right.
And thanks to their outreach on the business network, they had something like 142 offers from storage facility providers within 3 days, so that their grain wasn't wasted. So, real examples of real world problems that the business network helped resolve.
Yeah, and those kind of trying to address those kind of solutions, I think historically it would take that amount of time to even think about where to start
Yeah,
before
exactly. This
actually
isn't.
having
It's not.
solutions.
Yeah, it's not your traditional kind of RFP process, right? Where you
Right.
might spend several weeks researching the market and then run an RFP process for 3 or 4 weeks. These are scenarios where you need instant responses and solutions, and that's what our customers were able to derive from the business network.
Now we talked about connecting procurement, logistics, equipment as examples, and some of the use cases are around physical product. Essentially, is a business network, an integrated business network, is it more for organizations with a large direct or a manufacturing component, or are there use cases for service-based organizations that it's really more the indirects is where their spend is?
It's all of the above, right? Especially
Mm-hmm.
given where we came from with this business network, and as I say, the consolidation of the Ariba network, asset intelligence, and logistics business network. So, service-based organizations are also addressed by the business network, both directly and indirectly. For example, I've got this industrial pump on my production facility that's sending signals via this Internet of Things sensors, like I just mentioned. It's sending this data saying, "Hey, I'm not functioning as I should be," and this can trigger a preventative maintenance work order to be created in the plant maintenance system, which will then go ahead and firstly order a replacement pump, and then secondly schedule an engineer to attend on site to perform the work. So the scheduling of the engineer is done via our contingent workforce solution, which holds details of all the workers and their skill sets, their qualifications, whether they've attended site before and have already been kind of pre-approved and have done the health and safety assessments, etc. So in this scenario, we've combined, procurement, logistics, and contingent services to deliver the outcome of avoiding significant downtime on a production facility. But then we can also look purely at service organizations. For example, a large consulting projects that requires 50 consultants at locations around the globe to support a software implementation. Our network of consultants and managed service providers can respond to that request to ensure we can address that particular staffing requirement. And it's not just about putting those consultants on the job, but also, as I say, managing ensuring that they've got the appropriate assessments completed, qualifications, etc. But then also tracking and reporting of the time they're working via what we call service entry sheets and time sheets, and then automating the billing of this. So it's all encompassing.
When you were talking about IoT and some of the use cases there, it sounds like an integrated business network can be kind of the brain for a lot of these. That's the signals essentially that IoT is sending. So it's kind of this central repository that's then managing all the tasks that need to happen based on information that's being received. Is that a fair kind of summation, if you will, of what the ability of a business network is, or has the ability to do?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's just one great example of where the asset intelligence network that was previously a standalone network, if you will, within our portfolio, bringing that now into the overall business network. So rather than just tracking or receiving those signals, as I say, now we can, through the kind of workflows and business rules that have been defined, we can actually trigger transactions and follow-on events and activities to happen as a result of capturing those IoT signals. And much of this can be fully automated, right? So we're not looking at the delays that might be expected where you've got people involved in the process. You pick up on these signals and you've already defined what the workflow process should be, and it can go ahead and order those replacement parts and
Yeah.
schedule engineers to go do what they need to do.
Yeah, that's where my mind went next, is the automatable part of it, because it's all rule based. Or if you can build the rule base into it, then there's no need for somebody to get in the middle of it.
That's right. That's right. And even better, with you think about some complex custom production facility that's been constructed, and we've now got all of the technical drawings and service information on the network. So when a new engineer is scheduled to attend site, they're not having to spend time on the phone with the manufacturer or trying to even track somebody down. They've instantly got access to all of that data they need and all of the technical design documents to go ahead and do the job they need. You walk into a huge factory and you're looking for a certain pump that's sending these signals out. You're going to know exactly where to go find it and what you've got to do to swap it out or repair it.
Now, as I think about the supplier side, we're really big proponents at Procurement of the supplier experience, and doing things to become a customer of choice. That it's everything is a two-way relationship, not a buyer-seller relationship, and that a buyer shouldn't necessarily just be using the power of their leverage and their size and their checkbook, to push whatever they want on their suppliers. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about kind of the business case on the supply side when an organization is looking to bring in their suppliers into a network. Like this. What's the business case for them to do that? How do we encourage suppliers to come into an integrated business network?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to point out that it's entirely free for suppliers or trading partners, as we refer to them now, to join the business network. Registration is quick and easy. They just have to go to sap.com/business network and they can go ahead and register and build their profile in stages. But once registered, they can be discovered by other trading partners or buyers, if you will, in the traditional terminology, that want to connect and ultimately transact with them.
Yeah.
We've got an experienced team of folks around the world that work with our customers to manage the trading partner outreach and onboarding process, where they'll understand the customers or the buyer's objectives as to what they're looking to achieve. They'll analyze the types of trading partner the customer has, the volume of transactions and the spend that they have with the customer. And then they'll design the onboarding to occur in waves based upon that customer objective. Now, of course, one advantage SAP has of having the world's biggest business network is that often many of a new customer's trading partners are already onboarded and transacting on the business network with other customers. So it can actually be a very, very fast process for a new customer to be up and running and transacting on the business network. So, as I say, for new trading partners, we've made it really simple. Joining is free. In terms of the business case for them, get discovered and transact more business more efficiently with thousands of companies. Get paid faster to improve your working capital. Get to sell to businesses that you might otherwise struggle to get connected with. That's really the business proposition.
And when an organization is onboarding their trading partners into the network, do you recommend that they bring everybody into the network, or is it a certain criteria, whether it's number of transactions or amount of spend or any other constraints, to kind of think about the volume of folks you might want to bring into and what that change management process looks like?
Yeah, no, it really is everybody. But again, we are guided by the customer and their own objectives. Of course, we come to that project with our own view and our own idea of what best practice looks like. And having done this for thousands of companies now, we also have a kind of industry perspective. But ultimately, whatever suppliers and trading partners the customer wants to bring to the network, we support that, whether that's somebody they're sending 1 million purchase orders a year to, or whether it's more of a spot buy type of supplier that will address a very limited range of products, but maybe those products or services are very important to that customer's business.
You talked earlier about, especially in the context of bringing together these different networks into an integrated business network, the importance of a single data model. I just wonder if you could speak a little bit to why that's important, and perhaps some of the benefits of being able to do that, and the importance of doing that.
Yeah, integration of systems and data can really mean the difference between a successful solution that derives enormous benefit from the customer's business, or it can be the downfall of a project and,
Hmm.
an extremely costly one at that. Now, at SAP, our engineering teams have developed one data model, or ODM, since we like to give everything an acronym. And this really facilitates not just better integration across our applications, but it also provides for more efficient data management. So, one example would be our trading partner directory. All right, it's part of the business network. Every trading partner creates a trading partner profile,
Hmm.
and that can actually serve as the vendor master data
Yeah.
into the back-end ERP system, since the data models are aligned, right? So this can save customers so much time and cost in master data management. It provides for much simpler processes and, of course, better reporting. So hugely important, this concept of single data models.
And so that single or the one data model, is that cross customer, or would that be for each instance? So, and the way I'm thinking is, for example, you talked about vendor master. Is a new customer that you onboard to the platform able to take advantage of of some of the data that's in the vendor master record for a supplier that's used by somebody else? So you kind
Uh,
of get this community intelligence, so to speak.
Well, absolutely. I mean, first of all, we've defined the data models from many years of being in this business, and of course, some of those models are extensible as well, right? So some
Mhm.
customers will have some additional data they want to store
Yeah.
about a supplier or some other, let's call it master data objects. But yes, they can leverage that data that we've already captured at the network layer about a trading partner, and they can incorporate that into not just their own use of our procurement solutions, but further into their back-end ERP system. They can leverage
Mhm.
that data.
So that essentially is giving a single source of truth.
That's
With
exactly it.
Yeah, um, a lot of the even successful businesses. I want to talk a little bit about the how, because a lot of successful businesses still can find digital transformation fairly intimidating, um, and some of the things that we've talked about today from an outside perspective, it may seem like, this is just so far away. I'm not even sure where I should start on a journey to get to this point. Um, how do you recommend, or how are you working with organizations who are at that point at the beginning of their journey to start to build a roadmap, to get to a place where they have this single source of truth, where they have an integrated business network, where they're able to go and do some of the things that you talked about in half an hour, versus a week? Like, where do you even
Right.
start on that journey?
I think companies have to start by looking at their core business processes and
Hmm.
systems, and asking themselves, are we really executing the best way that we can, right? Are we operating in the most efficient way? Are we delivering the best outcomes for our customers with our current processes and
Yeah.
systems? Are we taking advantage of what some of the new technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning can provide, to give us better business insights to maybe then drive even more automation? And then, of course, with the backdrop of the pandemic, I think they also need to look at the resiliency of their business and their supply chains and determine how well they fared over the last 18 months, right?
Hmm.
What were the points of failure and why? What could they have done better by maybe leveraging cloud network solutions? And I think this will help companies focus on areas where they could start to make an impact via digital transformation. Some some customers are going big bang,
Yeah.
and others are taking smaller steps to see how the benefits will work for their particular business. I don't think it's a one size fits all model. For example, we've got customers at SAP that plan to move from their on premise ERP landscape to the S4HANA cloud ERP landscape. But this could be a really big project for them that might take several years. Maybe they've got 30, 40. I mean, we have customers with over 100 ERP instances. So
Yeah.
in the meantime, what they're doing is digitizing individual processes where they can support, let's call it a hybrid model, right? So a popular starting point for these on-premise ERP customers is to digitize the procurement process.
Yeah.
They're connecting their ERP systems to the SAP Business Network to achieve greater efficiencies in supplier collaboration, in the supplier discovery I talked about, the master data management with the one data model we just touched upon, and so on. And this is very easy to do and can actually yield amazing results very quickly with a very fast payback time, right? So if you're sending hundreds of thousands or millions of purchase orders to suppliers over the network as opposed to email or, God forbid, fax machines, as we touched upon earlier, the change order process is far better managed. Invoices are being approved for payment faster due to the fact that we have approval rules defined in the network. So as long as the invoice meets certain criteria, it's automatically approved for payment, which means then the customer can take advantage of things like early payment discounts. They get supply chain visibility on demand forecast versus the supplier's ability to meet the demand. They get the opportunity to find new sources of supply quickly, and so on. And if you're really struggling to identify what these quick wins might be for your own organization, there are, of course, thousands of consulting firms out there with huge SAP practices that have done this 100 times or more and can help focus on where and how to start.
When you see organizations who are looking at it from a procurement centric perspective, so maybe it's because that's where to start, or maybe it's just there's a burning platform or a need for a procurement leader to start thinking about digital transformation of their function, and so they're doing that not necessarily as part of a bigger picture. What do you recommend in terms of who they should bring to the table? Who from outside of procurement should be involved in the decision-making process, if you will, when it comes to architecture and design, and to make sure that what they're not doing is they're putting in something which is fit for procurement purpose, but not fit for the big picture, as you're thinking about how all these different kind of former individual business networks all connect in with each other?
Yeah, I mean, with any of these types of projects, I think procurement have always got to involve two, if not three, other very important stakeholders, and one is finance, because the financial aspects of new procurement solutions can often be quite significant, and I'm not just talking about the investment, but also the return on that investment. The CIO or the CTO, the IT department, of course, to ensure that the solutions that they're considering fit with any overriding IT architecture considerations, security requirements, data center locations, etc. But I think probably more importantly is the business, right? Because procurement are there to operate on behalf of the business, whether that's a financial services organization or whether it's a large manufacturer. They're still there to operate on behalf of the business, and so the business have got to be involved in the selection of the right solution that's going to address their needs. Because procurement people, positioning procurement software to procurement people is like putting a kid in a sweet shop, quite honestly, right? They can get very overexcited very easily, especially depending on what kind of solutions they've been using historically, and maybe lose sight of what the business really needs to be successful. So I think it's super important to ensure that the stakeholders in the business are involved in that decision-making process and the kind of review of the technology.
So the last question that I have is around spot buy and spot buying marketplaces. It's something that is becoming more prevalent, but also becoming, I think, more of interest to folks who are looking at digitization of their procurement. When should we be considering spot buying marketplaces? And I guess as a follow-up to that as well, as you're kind of thinking about the answer to that question, can procurement still retain kind of control, which I know is always a concern, for procurement folks of going to more guided buying, spot buying, while putting in place technology that allows ultimately the business to buy faster and have a more efficient process?
Yeah, spot buy purchasing is really important to our customers because whilst most spot buys are for items in categories that do not necessarily have a category manager assigned,
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps are therefore deemed non-strategic, our customers still need to ensure their employees are buying from known suppliers, recognized suppliers,
Yeah.
or marketplace providers in accordance with company policy and any regulatory policy they've got to adhere to. They still need to manage, in effect, this spend category. All right, the spot buy spend category is a category all on its own. And in fact, with the advent of so many marketplaces springing up in recent years, offering such a range of products and services, sometimes specific to a given industry, we're starting to see the line between contracted and non-contracted spend blurred.
Mm-hmm.
In fact,
Yeah.
I've heard from some customers over the last 6 months or so that they're actually able to buy goods from a marketplace cheaper, and that's at a so-called public price point, right? A marketplace
Yep.
price point,
Yep.
cheaper than they had negotiated with their preferred supplier.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, employees need to buy what they need to buy in order to manage their business, and procurement's job is to facilitate that in a compliant manner rather than prevent it from happening. As much as they're focused on cost savings targets, they're still there to serve the business. So by providing access to marketplace content and what I call direct seller content, who offer a public price, procurement are actually enabling the employees to do this, safe in the knowledge that the system has governance over the amount they can spend, the types of items available, the relevant approval process, and so on. So, this is a growing area of importance. Certainly within our own customer base, I see more and more customers deploying our spot buy and marketplace
Mm-hmm.
solution. And the spend throughput we see is increasing substantially year on year in that particular area of the business now. So super important, and I think it's just going to grow even more so.
Now, when you think about adoption for spot buy, I think one of the challenges is when you mentioned it right at the beginning there of when you see a price on a public website that is actually lower price than you see through your spot buy platform. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, because when you consider total cost, or perhaps there's rebates, or just lots of other things that go into the actual cost that the organization pays at the end of the day that aren't necessarily clear when you're just going clicking and buying. How have your clients who have been most successful in driving adoption kind of handled that conflict, if you will, in the
Well,
messaging?
yeah, it's all about the way that they can configure the system. So again, we're there to support the objectives of our customer and the way they want to manage their spend in support of whatever strategic objectives they have for their business. And so if they want to expose all content, both
Mm-hmm.
catalog content and marketplace content to the user, even if the marketplace content is cheaper, and it hasn't necessarily gone through the sometimes rigorous process as a preferred supplier or contracted supplier has gone through, that's entirely their decision. They can set up rules that say, well, if it's within a certain percentage lower or higher, then they're going to allow that or disallow that, right? So they won't even
Yeah.
display the content, so the user won't even know that there is potentially an alternative good product that they could be buying. Again, based upon certain types of items or in certain countries, they could choose to expose more content or not, as the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, interestingly, our own Spot Buy solution came into its own during the pandemic, where customers who had to instantly cut spending due to the fact that the pandemic had impacted on their own revenues, they were very quickly able to block spending on certain spot buy categories
Right.
or from specific sellers in order
Mm-hmm.
to control that tail spend or that non-contracted spend. And we heard from many customers that said just how happy and grateful they were that within a couple of clicks of the configuration screen, they were able to, for companies that have got 100,000 plus employees,
Right.
they're instantly able to either approve certain items or actually remove that content altogether from users to buy that.
So that really allows them to manage the spend and manage compliance to policy at scale, because they can do that with a flick of a switch, as opposed to having to do that on a one-on-one basis and then on an individual to individual basis.
That's right. And then I like to think of this as allowing employees to in effect ask for permission rather than for forgiveness. So often spot buy will be done via expenses, right? They'll just go to a store down the street, or they'll go to their favorite B2C marketplace, buy something and expense it. And that can be pretty tricky, because sometimes it could be that there wasn't budget available, or they've broken some kind of policy. They've bought an item that should always be bought from a preferred or contracted supplier. So by us bringing that type of marketplace and direct seller content into the corporate procurement solution, the individual gets to still buy their favorite item, or the item that they deem is most appropriate for them, but it's being done in a compliant manner, and they're not having to use their own credit cards. They're buying it, and it's being invoiced to the company and then subsequently paid.
Yeah. Well, Tony, I know it's about time to wrap up. So first of all, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I have one last question, which I always tell my guests is the easy question. If folks have enjoyed listening to the conversation and they would love to connect with you just to talk a little bit more about integrated business networks, where would be the best place for them to find you?
At a company level, of course, they can go to sap.com/business network, where there's a wealth of information at their disposal. And if they want to connect with me directly, just do a Google search for Tony Harris SAP, or a LinkedIn search, and they'll find me there. You'll find me on LinkedIn. Tony Harris SAP is the best way to search for me.
Okay, great. Well, what I'll do, Tony, is I'll include a link to your LinkedIn profile on the show notes page for today's episode. Listeners can find that just by going to artofprocurement.com/podcast. That's where we host all of our podcasts on the website. So that's artofprocurement.com/podcast. One last time, Tony, I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Phil. It's been a pleasure.
I want to thank you for listening into today's episode of The Art of Procurement. To go deeper, including access to transcripts and actionable outtakes from the podcast, join the free level of our AOP Mastermind community. To learn more, go to artofprocurement.com/mastermind. And to find our entire back catalogue of almost 400 episodes, go to artofprocurement.com/podcast.